There's nothing after today. But I just have to go. I have to go forward one last time to fix everything. All right. Let's see what we got. 1 hour. All right. Okay. So, small bundle of sport cards. Sand Soldier. Here we go. 1 mana, 1/1, ephemeral. Nexus Strike, deal 1 to the enemy Nexus. And it's a token. You can't main deck this. Okay. So this is like a Nazir card. Dune Keeper. When I'm summoned, summon a Sand Soldier. So it's basically just kind of like it summons an ephemeral. It's a 1 mana 2/1 that plays this side thing. That's pretty good. That's very good. Dune Keeper is a 2 units for 1 card. So you can use it on defensively for a potential blocker. Sand Soldier deals 2 to the Nexus total. So if you attack with this offensively, that's really powerful too. That's a really good card. That Dune Keeper is crazy. Emperor's Dais. When allies attack someone, an attacking Sand Soldier. Okay. These cards are all Sand Soldier cards. Wow. So yeah, Emperor's Dais. You'll play it on turn 2 for a landmark. That's a little slow. Again, we can compare that to kind of like Shark Chariot. It has a landmark keyword, and there probably will be ways to use that, so it might not be bad. Sandcrafter, 4 mana, 3/5, attack summon an attacking Sand Soldier. So that's just if the Sandcrafter attacks. That's not bad either, man. We can't evaluate these cards without knowing how good Sand Soldier, like what Azir actually does with Sand Soldiers. Desert's Wrath, grant allied Sand Soldiers everywhere +1 attack. All right. Okay. So everywhere keyword means even ones that don't exist yet. And it summons 2 Sand Soldiers when you play it. Okay. This is getting a little crazy. So yeah, Azir will have something to do with like summoning Sand Soldiers, some kind of payoff. His level up will probably be when you've summoned a certain amount of Sand Soldiers, that kind of thing. Buffing Sand Soldiers everywhere is actually a little spooky. I'm sure some of you guys are saying Iceborne Legacy. Iceborne Legacy is actually potentially pretty funny here. Inspiring Marshal. When you summon another ally, give it +2/+0 this round. But it costs 5 mana. So yeah, I mean this is definitely meant to be used with Sand Soldiers in some way. +2/+0 this round. I think a 5 mana 4/6 stat line ends up usually being a little too slow. There's a point in Runeterra where like stats start to kind of like fall off. I think this one might end up being a little too slow, but honestly, it can be pretty scary. It's kind of like it's almost like a Hecarim effect. If you're just talking about, if you're comparing this to ephemerals and you've got like your Shark Chariot, Inspiring Marshal, it has like a leveled up Hecarim aura. For when things get summoned, they just all get +2 attack. Which is, yeah, I mean, that is kind of scary. And then Sandstone Chimera, 12 mana 6/6. So this is their I was going to say giant, but there's no word for it in Runeterra. Yeah, like Plaza Guardian. Reduce my cost by 1 for each time an ally attacked this game. And it has no keyword. An ally attacked this game? 12. I mean, this card probably is not going to be good. Most of the, like, Golem style cards, like the Plaza Guardian, like, almost all of those cards, Scuttlegeist, Arbiter of the Peak, have not really been good. Plaza Guardian has actually seen some, like, fringe experimentation. This one doesn't even have a keyword, though. This one doesn't even have Overwhelm or Fearsome or anything. So, yeah, this one's kind of an expedition card. So, overall, is that it? That's today's reveal. So, we get a tiny bundle of, I guess, supporting cards for the Azir archetype. We don't know how to evaluate this card without knowing exactly what Azir is and how that's going to work. It's pretty interesting though. Dune Keeper has to be nuts. There's no way Dune Keeper isn't nuts. Like, even if you're not running an Azir deck. The ability, so on round 1, you can play an attack and that's 4 damage. So you can use it offensively. Like, compare this to Legion Saboteur. On round 1, you can just play this. You can attack with both it and the Sand Soldier. That's 4 damage. So it's kind of like as if your Saboteur got 2 attacks off in terms of the ability, right? That's crazy. You can use this on defense for a double block, an open development Punisher, right? And because it has a Sand Soldier that's just the chump blocker. And in a case where the opponent wants to attack, the Ephemeral will just stop them from attacking. This card is really good. This card is kind of nuts. That is a very, very, very crazy ability. A very, very crazy ability. It's pretty flexible. I like the ability for it to kind of like, you know, have an offensive and a defensive line. Really in like Aristocrat decks to sacrifice too. Yeah, you can run it in like Cursed Keeper, Blooded Caretaker decks. You can sacrifice the Sand Soldier, stuff like that. There's a lot going on. Field Musician. Ah, yes, Field Musician. Field Musician. That's true. Wait, I skipped it because I only had 2 cards. Field Musician. Is this what Field Musicians is for? When you've summoned 3 other allies, you refill your spell mana and draw 1. Is this the Field Musician deck? I think it might be. I mean, you'd have to be in Ionia, which is potentially a problem. But that's Field Musicians is a very scary card. Yeah, this is the deck where Field Musicians is kind of intended for, I think. Just like summoning a bunch of Sand Soldiers. It seems like Azir's entire kit is just built around these summons. So overall, Dunekeeper I think is a nuts card. Emperor's Dais I think is going to be a little bit on... It'll be viable. I really don't know how good this will be because we don't know how much Sand Soldier support there is out there. But for 2 mana, just for like 1 Sand Soldier each turn, it actually doesn't really feel worth it compared to a lot of other things that, you know, these archetypes usually have. In my head, I'm comparing it to Shark Chariot. Sandcrafter, Desert's Wrath, Inspiring Marshal. Honestly, none of these cards is really bad. Like Dais, Sandcrafter, Desert's Wrath, and Inspiring Marshal, I can all see. They're all anywhere between like decent and potentially quite solid, right? None of them feel as nuts as Dunekeeper, although Desert's Wrath could end up being a core concept of the deck if there's actually enough Sand Soldiers, which is pretty funny. And yeah, maybe Inspiring Marshal's ability to just end the games with these plus attack units is nuts, similar to the level attack rim. But yeah, for the most part, there's not too much to say before we actually look at Azir. But I do want to go through the LeBlanc reveal since, of course, I didn't go through the LeBlanc reveal yesterday. And there's a decent amount to talk about here. I'm going to be honest, there's not a lot to talk about here. So, for the most part, a lot of people are saying LeBlanc is bad. A lot of people are saying LeBlanc isn't great. People are saying stuff like LeBlanc needs a rework. LeBad, people are calling her. LeBlanc, yeah, pretty much. LeBlanc's not great. She is going to be pretty weak at being a 2 health unit. Mostly we can compare her to, you know, cards like Draven, where the plus attack doesn't even matter much because Draven has the access anyway. And the difference between 4 and 5 attack is just kind of the difference between getting chump blocked or not. And
I'm basically 1/8 gay.
She doesn't really give much payoff in terms of her level up. She has to see you deal 30 damage to start generating the mirror images, which is kind of crazy. So she has to see you deal the 15 damage to level up.
I'm basically 1/8.
And then you have to deal the, you know, additional 15 extra damage to get the first mirror image. Remember Zoe? Yeah, so there's a lot of like subreddit memes. I'm actually pretty proud because there's a lot of people correctly identifying why the like Remember Zoe memes don't really make sense, because there's very specific qualities and patterns to cards that have the ability to be underrated, and it's fairly easy to take concepts like that and eliminate them. I mean, obviously you can never be 100% sure about anything, but that's yeah, so something that most of Reddit is aware of, that the Zoe comparison doesn't work. Yeah, LeBlanc ultimately is mostly the reason to play her is kind of fuel for the reputation archetype. And Reputation doesn't have too much payoff. We can continue through the rest of these cards. The Mirror Image of LeBlanc, for those of you guys who haven't seen LeBlanc yet, is this token down here. The 2 mana slow, summon an exact ephemeral copy of an ally with 5+ power, which is an interesting payoff ability. I don't think there's anything, this isn't doing anything super reliably in the game, but I mean, it's a powerful card after you've dealt 30 damage. So sort of like Sivir's level up condition. Ultimately, I think one of the bigger problems with LeBlanc is this 2 health. There's not going to be a lot of ways to protect her, and she'll end up dying a lot to not even necessarily a Mystic Shot, but a decent amount of 2 damage effects. Like, there's a lot of like challengers that have 2 attack as well, like the Snake from Celestials, Fleet, Feather Tracker, Diana. I mean, anything with 2 attack. Just the 2 health stat line is no good for this. You don't get the Mirror Image on level up. No, you don't get the Mirror Image on level up. You have to deal 30 damage to get the Mirror Image. In fact, I think it might have to be more than 30 damage, because I don't think the damage count bleeds over across single damage instances through the progress. So for example, if you're 14 out of 15 and you do a single instance of 5 damage, I'm guessing that will take you to a level up, and I don't think she'll be leveled up at 4 out of 15. So in that example, I think she'll end up needing 34 damage, right? Because there's I don't think there would be damage bleed over on the count, since it counts 1 at a time. So yeah, you need at least 30 damage to be able to get a Mirror Image. So her payoff is pretty awkward. Black Rose Spy. This is an interesting card. This is one of the Reputation cards. It's a really cool card. This is actually one of the highest potential cards here. 2 mana, 3/2 Reputation. When I'm summoned, transform it into the exact copy of the strongest ally that struck this round. So keep in mind, Reputation is the keyword. That means you have to have seen, well, you have to have struck 4 or more times with 5 or more attack units throughout the course of the game. Which, in a deck built around a bunch of 5 or more attack units, this can definitely happen around turn 6, depending on how deep into that deck you're in, like how much of like all of the support cards you're using. But it's gonna be pretty slow, and Black Rose Spy is gonna be really awkward to be able to get off. So here's kind of the ideal situation for this. You want to use this like, you can, if you play out a Darius or something like that, you know, you've got a Darius on board, you've got Reputation triggered, you can, like, before your attack, you can bloody business something with your Darius and kill it, and then you can play Black Rose Spy and it'll become a second Darius, because this can clone champions. That's pretty cool. And then you can attack. But that's not generally very good. Like, that's kind of the best case scenario. The fact that it can't really transform into things very freely is pretty awkward, right? There's going to be a lot of things that you want to transform into that you're not going to be able to because it's not the strongest ally, or you can't get it to strike that round, or you're not really at the point in the game where you're getting value out of the fact that this card is 2 mana. So there's a lot of just kind of awkwardnesses built in here. And a 2 mana 3/2 is definitely a decent base for a stat line. But if your card is going to be played on turn 2 or turn 3 as a vanilla 3/2, a decent amount of the time, that's actually, I think, not great right now. There's a lot of cards that will do that job, but quite a bit better, right? Like, the 2 mana 3/2 stat line has gotten quite a bit power creeped. It used to be back in the day, a 2 mana 3/2, you could definitely, like, play a vanilla 2 mana 3/2 in certain metas and certain decks as, like, a fearsome blocker, but not so much anymore. There's a lot better things to be playing. Sigil of Malice is LeBlanc's champ spell. This is Reputation, I cost 1. It's basically a Mystic Shot in every way, except it's Noxus. It starts at 4 mana, and if you have achieved Reputation, it goes down to 1. A lot of people are pointing out that this is kind of like a worse Mystic Shot, and that's basically true. It starts at 4 mana, and you usually want to be using Mystic Shot, or you want the opportunity to use Mystic Shot in the early stages of the game, whereas Sigil of Malice kind of, basically, you can't use it at early stages in the game. The whole reason Mystic Shot is a good card, the entire reason Mystic Shot is a good card, is because you can use it early to trade as a 2 mana card, and you can use it late. It's a flexible card. The fact that this starts at 4 mana completely eliminates the opportunity to use it early. Completely. And it takes away the entire point of Mystic Shot. However, the fact that it's a Noxus is a big difference, and especially for like some kinds of burn decks and some kinds of like over the top, that's one benefit that Mystic Shot doesn't have. Overall, yes, a worse Mystic Shot. Whispered Words, Reputation, I cost 2, draw 2. So people are comparing this to Salvage, the Bilgewater card. And yeah, it's basically the same thing as Salvage. The toss doesn't matter. I think a lot of people say this is a better Salvage or something because of the toss. The toss literally doesn't matter. Yeah, it doesn't matter at all. Reputation on Whispered Words, for the most part, Whispered Words is a card that will see play. People are going to run this in decks. Because draw is an incredibly powerful thing in Legends of Runeterra. And pretty much any card that says the word draw cards on it is something that will at least optionally see play. In like slower Noxus decks, they've actually been really starved for draw. A lot of Swain decks and stuff like that, like Swain, Ezreal Draven, maybe like Swain Elise. A lot of people throughout like many different patches, the idea of Swain Shadow Isles has actually been kind of close, and people have tried it. And it's always fallen short, mostly because you don't have enough draw. So people will be trying stuff like Swain Shadow Isles decks. People will be trying more like Swain Freljord, which might have been awkward in the past. Now that we have Whispered Words, those decks might make a lot more sense, right? Now, the Reputation, you're basically not getting off in that kind of deck. So anyone who's going to call this a better Salvage is kind of trolling, because in that deck, it is basically exactly the same thing as a Salvage. Like, you really can't call it a better Salvage. In a deck like Swain, or, you know, any sort of like stally deck, the Reputation is literally never going to go off. Like literally never. And the toss is, I mean, depending on the situation, it can be an upside or a downside. It's just like it's kind of disingenuous to call this a better Salvage, right? You can say, well, technically it's kind of a better Salvage because in like 0.01% case of scenarios, it has the ability to make a difference on the outcome of the game in that specific deck, and that's just kind of silly, because that's not what people mean when they say the word better. It's in a Reputation deck, it's a better Salvage, yeah. Like, but that's like saying Salvage is a better Whispered Words in a deep deck. Like, guys, they're the same card. They truly, they're, unless you're using a very specific kind of deck, they're the same card. But that's fine, because Salvage is a good card that Noxus wishes it had access to in control-y decks, and that's why you're gonna put this in your Noxus decks. It doesn't have to, you don't have to compare it to Salvage because it's a Noxus card. That's my point. I don't know why people are comparing cards between regions like that. That it's not a better Salvage, it's a Noxus Salvage. But a Noxus Salvage is great. That's what Noxus needed. Right? Okay, great. Whispered Words, a pretty good card. This will see play outside of Reputation decks. Mimic is interesting. 3 mana, Reputation, I cost 1. Pick a spell in player hand and create a fleeting copy of it in hand. So I actually don't know if this one really makes sense. I don't know if this one really ends up making enough sense to use. I've actually seen a decent amount of people on the subreddit say this is like one of their preferred cards from this. Like, people are saying stuff like, I like Whispered Words and Mimic looks pretty cool. Mimic seems pretty expensive to me. Similar to Sigil of Malice, this is literally unplayable pre-Reputation. And the fact that the payoff to this isn't great. It seems like a side grade, if not downgrade, to Spell Thief, even with the payoff. Because when you've achieved Reputation, it's a 1 cost, pick a spell in player hands, and create a fleeting copy of it in hand. So, I mean, you can deny a deny, which is, I think, something that they changed about Spell Thief, that can't do that unless there's a deny that's been played already, basically. You can mimic Mirror Image. Yeah, you're supposed to like mimic Mirror Image. That's kind of like the payoff if you're using the full deck. But similarly, I don't think, similarly to Sigil of Malice, I don't think it's really gonna be making enough sense in decks. the fact that in the The biggest problem with these cards is the fact that they're both completely unplayable before you've achieved Reputation, right? Like, when we compare this to something like Deep, and because Reputation and Deep, they are extremely different in their approaches, but they're very similar in kind of like their broad kind of categorical design, right? They're mini quest packages, which I love. Deep has a really important property though, which is that a lot of the cards that, you know, the cards that go deep, this stuff like Devourer and stuff like, you know, the Beast Below, even Abyssal Eye, even before you're deep, these cards are not good, but they're kind of playable, right? They feel a lot more playable. They're not going to achieve high value, but first of all, they're kind of like, these cards are designed to be played in the late game anyway. Right? You know, Abyssal Eye and Devourer of the Depths are cards that are kind of designed to be played as finishers to your game plan. So it makes sense to just end up, you know, playing them later, and it's okay that they're a little bit weaker when you play them early. But even like Abyssal Eye, playing it as a 5-mana 3/3 elusive Nexus Strike Dawn, that's not bad. Like, Zero Irony, that's not bad at all. Abyssal Eye has actually been considered and ran multiple times, semi-experimentally, it's been ran multiple times in elusive decks that aren't even trying to go deep. Just because a 5-mana 3/3 elusive draw 1 of Nexus Strike is actually just fine. Like, it's not bad if you need an elusive. Devourer of the Depths, likewise, you have the ability to potentially obliterate a threat. You can obliterate like a TF or something, even if you're not deep. And I think that's kind of like where the comparison falls off. Because Sigil of Malice and Mimic are cards that kind of like want the flexibility to be played earlier, and they feel a lot less playable pre-Reputation, right? They feel like you're only going to be able to play them after you've achieved the Reputation. And Reputation is a very interactable strategy, unlike Deep, whereas, you know, Deep, you have a hard time disrupting the ability to get there. With Reputation, any good deck or any decent deck, doesn't have to be a good deck, any decent deck will have plenty of tools to disrupt your ability to get to Reputation. So yeah, overall, the general package is pretty awkward. It's a lot of high synergy stuff that is very disruptible. And Whispered Words is gonna be good. Bloody Business, the next card, is decent. This card's interesting. It might actually be very solid. We've got kind of like this. It's kind of perfectly balanced, right? We've got Single Combat, which is a 2-mana, and ally and enemy strike each other. That one's very good. We've got like Whirling Death, which is, it's 1 more mana, but it only affects battling things, which means you can't use it in combat, or you can't use it to kill something that's not in combat, like a Twisted Fate sometimes, where you just need to kill something. Whirling Death is pretty good, but it's actually usually just short of seeing play. I think largely just because of the region it's in, Noxus. Then there's Bloody Business at 4, and then Concerted Strike at 5, right? So you can call Bloody Business, it's like a Concerted Strike's baby brother. It's kind of like Single Combat's big brother, but it's the ability for it to be like an upgrade to Whirling Death in terms of you can kill small things is nice. So Bloody Business is not bad. It's definitely one of, I think, the better things in this archetype. But it's something that has a bit more of a deck building cost. You're only going to be able to run it with a decent amount of 5 attack units. So overall, I don't expect it to see play outside of this archetype like Whispered Words. Thorn of the Rose, when I'm summoned, to create a Guile in hand. Guile is, of course, the card that stuns an enemy. So Guile is actually almost an underrated card, but this creating it in hand isn't great. Thorn of the Rose we can compare to Arachnoid Sentry, and the biggest problem with Thorn of the Rose is that with Arachnoid Sentry, the entire point of the card is that both actions happen at once, right? Like, when you take away the ability for Arachnoid, like, first of all, it's 1 more mana. Thorn of the Rose is 1 more mana. But second of all, when you take away the ability for Arachnoid Sentry to be something that activates both effects in 1 action, you kind of lose the entire purpose of the card, right? It is Yasuo card. Yeah, it's Yasuo support. Thorn of the Rose, you can use it with Yasuo, and it might actually make decks like that. There's a lot of like more interesting combos, like different ways to use these cards that I haven't really been, you know, touching on. And of course, what you're trying to get with Thorn of the Rose is the ability to have like a 5 attack unit. The only problem is, again, the payoff to a lot of these 5 attack unit packages isn't really great. So overall, I mean, Yeah, I basically, for the most part, there's a lot of different posts flying around right now, but in general, for the most part, I think that Reddit is pretty accurate in broad strokes of things. Like, yeah, the archetype itself is not really going to be super powerful. Yeah, it's not really a situation we can compare to Zoe. Sivir is pretty good. Sivir is actually maybe very good. Her ability to have spell shield to be a 4-drop, which Runeterra is really lacking. You know, the payoff on the level up, mostly like the low deck building cost, right? Because LeBlanc has a very high deck building cost, and to be able to make it work, Sivir is just, she's got the free spell shield. The level up condition is going to be a little bit slow sometimes, but that's fine. You can slap her in. Your deck will have a win condition sometimes, and yeah, maybe you'll want to run Inner Sanctum or Payday with her to help her turn into a win condition, but she's at least decent. Maybe Sivir won't even end up, like, maybe she'll end up seeing cuts in some of the more competitive decks, but she's solid. And a large part of that is because of the spell shield. It's really three things. It's the spell shield, it's the fact that her level up is a win condition, and it's the fact that she doesn't really have a big deck building cost. And really, all three of those are completely different. Oh yeah, and LeBlanc is an I've seen too. LeBlanc's level up is an I've seen condition, whereas Sivir's is not. You just have to deal 35 damage, right? And keep in mind, LeBlanc's level up doesn't really do a lot. Sure, you get the 15, you get the +1/+1 stats on the first 15, but you only start getting mirror images after 30 because you have to deal 15 plus again to get the first mirror image. Which means that apart from the LeBlanc's initial +1/+1, their level up condition is basically kind of the same. Even though LeBlanc's is an I've seen and Sivir isn't. It's like you have to deal like 30 damage. So yeah, overall, the LeBlanc archetype looks a little bit weak. I think that it's like, it feels like it needs a tweak. I really do like what they're going for Reputation, because I think that sort of mini quest is one of the better ways to design an archetype. It's really cool. But just in terms of the payoff mostly, and a couple of the mana points at which these cards are balanced, like, you know, Sigil of Malice maybe should be a 3 mana card, for example. It doesn't have to be exactly that, but a couple of the like mana points that these Reputation cards are balanced around.
It's too bad there isn't a new champion for Noxus.
Yeah, overall, I mean, it is really cool for Swain. I can't express how big of a deal it is for something like Whispered Words. For a deck like Noxus Control, it's been gated so hard this entire time by lack of draw, to the point where, I mean, Swain TF was one of its options just because that gives it some amount of draw. But yeah, Whispered Words is going to be really, really nice for the flexibility of that archetype. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Overall, Azir is going to be really cool. I think, I mean, there's so much community talking about like LeBlanc and tweaking LeBlanc and stuff like that, that, I mean, I'm pretty sure that, you know, that something like that will happen. Probably not at launch. I don't think they have the ability to tweak LeBlanc at launch, but at the very least, I mean, I'm confident that they'll respond to these kinds of things. There's probably going to be some kind of like buff across the board in like the first like major balance patch after the launch, and that would be like a month from now or something like that. And yeah, I mean, it's not like without some tweaks she can't be good. Absolutely. I feel like LeBlanc will be another Zoe and she's fine. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people are saying that, which is here. What where was the post? I don't actually know if I can find it, because there's actually been too many LeBlanc posts. Yeah, I'm fairly good at predicting cards' power levels. The problem with LeBlanc is that she's inherently disruptible in a way that trades down to stuff. So let me actually talk about this, because I think a lot of people don't really understand what happened with Zoe or TF, for that matter, because it's an extremely common. People like to say, oh, but everyone underrated Zoe and Twisted Fate, so therefore LeBlanc will be fine. First of all, that doesn't even make sense. That can be used as an argument for why we can't be sure and might want to wait and see. That's fair, but that's not exactly what everyone's saying. The biggest thing comes down to the like fundamental properties of stuff. They're on copium. Yeah, pretty much actually. It's very, very specific properties of things that allow things to be underrated, and very, very specific properties of things that don't. LeBlanc is going to end up being extremely disruptible by any sort of like relatively high tier strategy. I shouldn't say high tier, by any like decent strategy, by any deck that's like tier 2 or higher in Legends of Runeterra, which is a lot of the latter at any point. The fact that she will consistently be trading down to stuff that's dealing 2 damage. She doesn't have a win condition that's undisruptible like Zoe and like TF. When she trades down, it's like a cost, as opposed to Zoe and TF, who are cheap when you play them. So when they die, it's not a big deal, right? And also, I personally don't even really remember people underrating TF. I guess that's because I wasn't going on Reddit at that time. But like, I mean, I remember TF being pretty good when we were looking at it here. Yeah, LeBlanc is basically an extremely disruptible property. When the reputation as an archetype gets disrupted, it will lose a ton of value because you're entirely contingent on activating reputation, and reputation is inherently incredibly disruptible. You can stop LeBlanc from living by just killing her if she has low health. You can stop this damage from happening by, like, you know, stopping the striking from happening. You can stun units, you can like glimpse block, stuff like that can disrupt this strategy, right? You can stop a lot of the reputation triggers. A lot of the cards, the 5 attack cards have like 1 health, so like the 1 damage pings are going to be extremely disruptible there. That's something that applies to Trifarian Glory Seeker as well. And of course, when you go into use slow speed spells like Mirror Image, or when you go into use combos like Black Rose Spy, or when you go into use combos like Bloody Business, every aspect of this is very disruptible. Every aspect of this is something that the opponent can react to in a way that shuts you down when that happens, and you have no counter response when that happens, right? So every step of the way, this is the problem with the comparison to TF or Zoe, because while it is true that like people were saying, you know, Zoe will have a hard time leveling up, and while that's definitely true, and while that's something that I was saying too, the thing is that in Zoe and TF, when they die, you're still doing fine because you haven't traded down to the opponent. In fact, you can't have, because Zoe is 1 mana. It's impossible to really trade down on a Zoe death, because to kill her, they're gonna have to spend a card and a mana too. And when that happens, you're like, whatever. And of course, if she draws a card, then you're up no matter what happens after that point. Same with TF, who can just blue card. And LeBlanc has literally none of those properties. So I think a lot of people aren't really understanding the situation at all, and kind of saying, well, but maybe people could be wrong. And, you know, don't get me wrong, it's not like that's never a possibility, but it's really not the same situation at all. Like I said, I think there's nothing really wrong with this. The thing is, I do think it's true that LeBlanc is going to be awkward, but again, there's enough community outcry that I think that she'll be buffed or reputation might be tweaked reasonably quickly, and that will be cool. And I don't think that's a problem at all. I don't see like anything long-term issue with that. So I'm pretty happy about the situation. I like Whispered Words. I think that, yeah, a couple of these cards are going to be weak on launch, but as long as the devs are aware about it, as long as the people like are good at making them know like what's important, then everything will get resolved. So it's not a big deal. I think reputation overall might need some kind of like tweak rework across the board. Like some people have suggested reputation should be, you know, instead of always being 4, there should be like different reputation points, like, oh, I need to have struck more times, or oh, I need to have struck just 2 times for this, that kind of thing. So yep, that's pretty much today's reveal in a nutshell, and I'm looking forward to tomorrow. We're gonna getting this mysterious champion Azir with these sand soldiers. That'll be very cool.